In the summer of 1683, a massive Ottoman army, representing a dynasty that had spanned nearly 6 centuries, stood at the gates of Vienna. For generations, the Ottoman Empire had been a formidable engine of conquest, expanding its borders from Arabia to North Africa and deep into the heart of Europe. Now its vast military machine was poised to strike at the Habsburg capital, a move with profound implications for the continent. With the city's defenses strained, its emperor having fled, and its population facing starvation, the fall of Vienna appeared almost inevitable. However, the campaign would be marked by a series of critical miscalculations. The failure in this single battle would not only halt the Ottoman advance, but would also initiate a sequence of events that sent the empire into a gradual decline from which it would never recover. This is the story of how a series of tactical errors on one day in September fundamentally altered the balance of power in Europe and set a 600-year-old empire on a path toward its eventual dissolution. To understand the significance of the events at Vienna, one must first understand the behemoth that was the Ottoman Empire. Forged by Turkic warriors in the 13th century, the empire's history was one of near continuous expansion. A pivotal moment came in 1453 when Sultan Mehmed II conquered Constantinople, ending the Byzantine Empire and transforming the city into Istanbul, the new center of Ottoman power. From this new capital, the pace of conquest continued. Under sultans such as Selim I and Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire reached its political and military zenith. Its territory stretched across 3 continents, encompassing the Balkans, much of Hungary, and the trade routes connecting east and west. The Ottoman State was a global superpower, possessed of a feared military and a sophisticated bureaucracy. An earlier siege of Vienna in 1529, though unsuccessful, had sent a shockwave of alarm across Christian Europe. By the 1680s, however, the structure of the empire was beginning to show signs of strain. The line of formidable warrior sultans had waned, and the incumbent, Mehmed IV, was more dedicated to courtly pursuits than to military command. As a result, effective power had shifted to the office of the Grand Vizier. The man who occupied this post was Merzifonlu Kara Mustafa Pasha. An ambitious product of the empire's elite, Kara Mustafa possessed a fervent desire for a military victory that would cement his legacy. He perceived weakness in the Holy Roman Empire, whose ruler, Emperor Leopold I, was preoccupied with the threat posed by King Louis XIV of France on his western frontier. A pretext for war soon emerged from the portion of Hungary still under Habsburg control. There, Protestant nobles led by Imre Tokoli were in revolt against the Catholic Emperor Leopold. Tokoli appealed to the Ottomans for assistance, and Kara Mustafa seized the opportunity. He persuaded Sultan Mehmed IV to authorize a campaign, ostensibly to support their Hungarian allies. The true objective, however, was widely understood to be Vienna, the prize that had eluded even Suleiman the Magnificent. It was a monumental gamble, driven by one man's ambition. In the spring of 1683, the Ottoman war machine began to mobilize. Forces from across the empire gathered at Edirne in a massive logistical undertaking. Roads and bridges throughout the Balkans were repaired, and supply depots were established to support the army's advance. Estimates of its final size vary, but modern scholarship suggests a force numbering between 100,000 and 170,000 men. The core of this army consisted of the Janissaries, the elite infantry of the Sultan, alongside the Sipahis, the empire's heavy cavalry. A particularly feared component was the Tatar cavalry from the Crimean Khanate, a vassal state. These riders were masters of the raid, spreading out far ahead of the main force to burn villages and disrupt enemy preparations, serving as a potent weapon of psychological warfare. As the Ottoman host advanced, Emperor Leopold scrambled to assemble a coalition. His efforts were complicated by his rivalry with Louis of France, who tacitly encouraged the Ottoman campaign to weaken the Habsburgs. However, diplomatic efforts, mediated by Pope Innocent XI, yielded a critical alliance with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The treaty stipulated mutual defense. If Krakow were attacked, Austria would assist, and if Vienna were attacked, the Poles would march to its aid. This pact would prove to be the single most important document of the campaign. The Ottoman army reached Belgrade in early May, where a formal declaration of war was dispatched to Vienna. The message was uncompromising, demanding surrender or promising destruction. As Kara Mustafa's forces crossed into Habsburg territory, the small Austrian field army fell back, avoiding a pitched battle while awaiting the formation of a relief force. On July 7th, with Tatar raiders already in the suburbs, Emperor Leopold and his court departed the capital. The city's defense was left to Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a veteran commander with a garrison of roughly 15,000 soldiers and a supporting citizen militia. They faced an army that outnumbered them nearly 10-1. As the gates of Vienna were sealed, the city braced for the siege. On July 14, 1683, the main Ottoman army arrived and began to encircle Vienna. Kara Mustafa established his lavish command center directly opposite the imperial palace, a clear statement of his intentions. It was at this point that he made his first critical mistake. His commanders urged an immediate, overwhelming assault. Vienna's defenses, while respectable, might have been breached by the sheer weight of Ottoman numbers before the defenders could fully organize their resistance. However, Kara Mustafa hesitated. He sought to capture the city's immense wealth intact, as a city taken by storm was traditionally given over to the soldiers for plunder. He believed a formal siege would compel a surrender, preserving the city's riches. This decision reflected a significant underestimation of the defenders' resolve, and more importantly, an overestimation of the time available to him. The Ottoman army was highly proficient in siege warfare. Engineers immediately began constructing a complex network of zigzagging trenches, or saps, which allowed attackers to approach the walls while shielded from defensive fire. Concurrently, specialist miners began digging tunnels with the aim of placing explosive charges beneath the city's bastions. This created a state of constant tension within Vienna, as defenders listened for the faint vibrations of digging. When a tunnel was detected, defenders would dig counter tunnels, leading to brutal, close-quarters combat fought underground. Above ground, Ottoman artillery maintained a steady bombardment, though the guns were lighter than what a protracted siege required. Food supplies within the city quickly dwindled, and disease, particularly dysentery, became rampant. Despite the grim conditions, the garrison under Starhemberg's command fought tenaciously, repelling numerous attacks on the breaches. By early September, the city was at its breaking point. The garrison had sustained heavy casualties, and major portions of the walls were near collapse. Starhemberg dispatched a final, urgent message through the Ottoman lines to the relief army, stating, "No more time to lose. No more time to lose, for God's sake." While Vienna held on, a coalition army was being assembled. The German states of the Holy Roman Empire, including Bavaria and Saxony, mustered their forces under the command of Charles of Lorraine, Emperor Leopold's brother-in-law. The most critical component, however, came from the north. Honoring his treaty obligations, King John III Sobieski of Poland marched south with his army. Known to the Ottomans as the Lion of Lechestan, Sobieski was a renowned military commander with a lifetime of experience fighting against Ottoman and Tatar forces. His army was not the largest, but it included the Polish winged hussars, widely considered the most effective heavy cavalry of the era. The combined coalition army that gathered on the banks of the Danube was a patchwork force of Poles, Austrians, Bavarians, and Saxons. Supreme command of the nearly 70,000-strong force was given to King John Sobieski as the highest-ranking monarch present. The commanders then made an audacious strategic choice. Rather than taking a direct approach, they decided to march their entire army through the Wienerwald, the dense hilly Vienna woods to the city's west. This was a significant logistical challenge, requiring them to move tens of thousands of men and artillery over difficult terrain. This exposed a second, and perhaps most critical, failure in the Ottoman campaign. Kara Mustafa's Tatar cavalry, which should have been providing reconnaissance, were largely occupied with plundering the countryside. The Grand Vizier knew a relief army was coming, but catastrophically underestimated its size, its speed, and its chosen route of approach. Believing the Vienna woods to be impassable for a large army, he left the passes lightly guarded. He remained fixated on taking the city, keeping the bulk of his elite janissaries in the trenches for a final assault rather than redeploying them to face the threat gathering at his rear. On the night of September 11th, the coalition army reached the summit of the Kahlenberg, a hill overlooking the city. From there, they could see the entire Ottoman encampment spread out below. Signal fires were lit, alerting the city's defenders that the relief army had arrived. The morning of September 12, 1683 began with a mass on the Kallenberg, at which King Sobieski himself served the altar. As the sun rose, the Allied army began its difficult descent from the heights, a move that caught the Ottoman camp by surprise. The battle commenced around 4 a.m. as Ottoman units engaged the Allied left flank under Charles of Lorraine. The fighting was intense throughout the day, with the German and Austrian forces systematically pushing forward and clearing Ottoman defensive positions. Kara Mustafa was now caught in a two-front battle he had failed to anticipate, contending with the relief army to his rear while simultaneously trying to prevent a sally by the Vienna garrison. This is where his third critical mistake unfolded. Rather than disengaging from the siege to concentrate his full strength against the relief force, he attempted to do both. He left thousands of his best troops in the trenches to continue pressure on the city while committing other units to the main battle in a piecemeal fashion. His forces were consequently stretched thin and poorly coordinated. Despite these disadvantages, the Ottoman soldiers fought with determination for over 12 hours, and their lines held. By late afternoon, the Allied infantry advance had slowed, its men nearing exhaustion. From his position, Sobieski identified the decisive moment. The Ottomans had committed most of their available forces and were weakened by the long day of fighting. He gave the order for a final, coordinated cavalry assault. Approximately 18,000 horsemen formed up along the ridge, one of the largest cavalry charges in history. At the tip of this formation were 3,000 Polish winged hussars under the direct command of the king. Clad in armor and distinguished by the large feathered wings on their saddles that created an unnerving sound, they carried long lances designed to shatter on impact. Around 5 p.m., the signal was given. The massed cavalry thundered down the slopes, aimed directly at the Ottoman command center. The impact was cataclysmic. The exhausted Ottoman lines, already strained to their breaking point, disintegrated under the weight of the charge. The hussars' lances broke the infantry formations, and panic spread through the Ottoman army. What had been an organized force dissolved into a rout. Kara Mustafa fought briefly before being swept up in the retreat, escaping the battlefield. The siege of Vienna was broken. The victory was total. In a letter to the Pope, Sobieski paraphrased Julius Caesar, writing, "Veni, vidi, Deus vicit." I came, I saw, God conquered. The abandoned Ottoman camp yielded immense spoils, including gold, jewels, and supplies. Famously, they also found hundreds of sacks filled with dark beans. Initially thought to be camel feed, these were identified as coffee, and according to popular legend, this discovery led to the opening of Vienna's first coffeehouse, introducing a beverage that would become a staple of the city's culture. For the Ottomans, the defeat was a catastrophe. They lost the majority of their army, their artillery, and their entire supply train. The myth of Ottoman invincibility, which had long influenced European politics, was shattered in a single afternoon. Kara Mustafa's fate was sealed. He retreated to Belgrade and, in an attempt to deflect blame, executed several of his subordinate commanders. The failure was too great to excuse. On December 25, 1683, agents of the Sultan carried out his execution by strangulation with a silk cord. His head was returned to the Sultan as proof. The defeat at Vienna was the definitive turning point in the long conflict between the Ottoman and Habsburg empires. It marked the end of Ottoman expansion into Europe and the beginning of a long, gradual retreat. Galvanized by the victory, Pope Innocent formalized a new Holy League, an offensive alliance comprising the Holy Roman Empire, Poland, and Venice, which Russia would later join. The objective was no longer merely defensive, but to reclaim European territories under Ottoman rule. This initiated the Great Turkish War, a 16-year conflict in which the strategic momentum had decisively shifted. One by one, Ottoman strongholds in Hungary fell, including the capital Buda, in 1686. Another crushing defeat at the Second Battle of Mohacs in 1687 effectively ended Ottoman control of Hungary. The war culminated in the Battle of Zenta in 1697, where Prince Eugene of Savoy annihilated another Ottoman army. The empire could no longer sustain the conflict. The Great Turkish War concluded with the Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699. This was a landmark event. For the first time, the Ottoman Empire was forced to negotiate from a position of weakness with a European coalition and formally cede vast territories. Nearly all of Hungary was transferred to the Habsburgs, with other territories returned to Poland and Venice. The treaty was a formal acknowledgement of the new balance of power. The defeat at Vienna did not cause the empire to collapse overnight, but it acted as a catalyst that accelerated its decline by exposing and exacerbating long-term structural issues. The war had been ruinously expensive, and the loss of its wealthiest European provinces crippled the imperial treasury. This economic weakness was compounded by inflation and shifting trade routes, increasing the empire's reliance on European powers. Militarily, the battle exposed a growing technological and tactical gap between the Ottoman army and its Western rivals. Attempts at reform were often obstructed by entrenched interests like the Janissary Corps. Once the empire's elite fighting force, the Janissaries had evolved into a powerful political faction, resistant to modernization, frequently instigating revolts that weakened the state from within. Politically, the authority of the central government eroded over the subsequent centuries. In the 19th century, the rise of nationalism, an idea imported from Europe, began to fracture the multi-ethnic empire. Nationalist movements among Greeks, Serbs, Bulgarians, and others, often supported by rival European powers, led to the loss of the empire's remaining Balkan territories. The state once feared as a conqueror became known as the sick man of Europe. The final blow came with its decision to side with the Central Powers in World War I, which led to its ultimate defeat and dismemberment. In 1922, the Sultanate was abolished, officially ending the Ottoman Empire. The collapse was a complex process driven by numerous internal and external factors. But the fuse was lit in 1683. The failure at Vienna was the turning point that transformed the empire from aggressor to a state in retreat, setting in motion a chain of military defeats, territorial losses, and internal decay that would ultimately lead to its demise. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and let me know what you think in the comments.